Hello. So I have been watching pretty much everything that Toofbush or Paul Chevalier puts out for a while now. I think he makes such amazing stuff. I'm so inspired by his videos. So I have purchased a frankly quite unwieldy amount of this gray corduroy, and I will be making a zip front chore jacket, pretty simple with collar, patch pockets. I'm using the bear jacket pattern by Wardrobe by Me, and I'm going to do a bunch of embroidery on it. But first, I need to cut out my pattern, and I meant to do it when I had access to a giant cutting mat, and then I didn't. So now I have to suffer. But it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Okay, all my pattern pieces are cut, at least my main fabric. I'm going to cut my lining later. I'm going to zigzag the edges of all of the panels I'm going to do embroidery on so they don't fray too much on me. Okay, done with that, and I was able to use up a bunch of random half-empty bobbins, so that was great. I think now I just take all of these pieces everywhere I go for however long it takes. I will be spending 16 hours in a car this week, so that will probably be productive. I made this sample of what the lines of stitching were going to look like because I had not decided on color. I didn't know how much different threads would show up on this fabric. So I'm going to go for this thickness of black thread, and then I might do some of this doubled over blue. It's not going to be very visible, but that's fine. Because my zipper that I have is kind of this bright blue. So that's the plan. I'm going to put together a little travel kit of everything I will need, and then I spend a million hours hand sewing. It has been 2 weeks and I'm all done with the main panel hand sewing, which is very exciting. I still have a little bit more prep work to do before I actually start assembling. I need to cut my lining. And then I've decided that I'm going to do a quilted lining for the torso at least. So I need to quilt that. In the interest of cleaning out my stash and also of not spending any money, I Frankensteined together a bunch of batting just by pushing it flush against each other and zigzagging across that seam. And then I made my little quilt sandwich. I think jury's out on whether I actually needed to do the backing piece on this. I think I was worried about the batting unraveling because of the way it was stitched together. And then I quilted. I just did a pretty rough diamond shape. Since my fabric was on a grid, I just generally aimed towards the corners of each square, and that was good enough for me. It didn't need to be perfect, just needed to be not embarrassing. I cut each piece a little big so I could quilt it without worrying about it shifting, so I went back and cut everything down to size after. I'm going to do some interior pockets on the lining. Before I started working on my interior pockets, I stitched my facing right sides together with my lining fabric. Okay, I'm doing what I believe is maybe called a slit slash pocket. It's basically a welt pocket without the welt. So I have my two panels right sides together, my one half of my pocket bag and my front lining panel. I'm going to hand baste 2 lines here just to make sure everything stays in place, and then I'm going to machine stitch around this diamond. I will then cut the middle of the diamond and flip everything right sides out, or I'll flip it like through itself. So this piece will end up on the other side of my lining, I think. Now, some might say that I should try this on a scrap piece of fabric, but I'm just going to choose to believe that everything will work out. Okay, moment of truth. Let's see if that worked. Okay, I think I have some adjustments to do just based on how small that is. So I'm going to clip a little more and then maybe re-stitch a little further out. I did end up going back and stitching about 1/2 inch out from my original stitch line, and it turned out pretty good. I whip stitched around the edge just to hold everything in place. And then, look, it's a pocket. It is not really big enough for my hand, but it's big enough for my phone, and that's what's important. And then I did all of that onto the other side. Speaking of pockets, I also finished up my exterior pockets. Look how good they look. Just kidding, those were way too small and I had to make a whole nother pair. And then I top stitched those onto my jacket front along the top and side and basted them along the free edges. And then I also need to make an adjustment to the collar. I've looked at the pattern again, the pattern photos again, and I've realized I really don't like how large the collar is. I have a pretty similar jacket and silhouette, so I'm just going to cut the collar down based on that. And then I need to interface all of the points indicated on the pattern. I am finally ready to start putting some pieces together. I've got everything laid out. I'm going to start by putting my yoke and my back panel right sides together and sewing along that seam. After my yoke was done, I assembled my sleeves, which was pretty simple, and I admired my general success at pattern matching, even though I didn't try that hard at it. I also added in some basting stitches at the top so I can gather my sleeve into my armhole later, which left me with 2 beautiful tubes. I went to match my linings to my shell fabric, and I realized I've made 2 mistakes. The first of which, when I cut this pattern, this is the fold line. I did not cut it on the fold line. I don't know why. So I need to recut the pattern and then recut my piece. And I realized I also was meant to do the facing piece down here before I sewed this piece on, which is fine, but it means I need to recut my facing piece so it actually reaches this full distance. So I'm going to do that now. My other problem is I don't have any interfacing left, really. So I'm either gonna have to really patchwork it together or just sew another piece of fabric on the back of here. So we'll see what I decide to do. After I was done fixing my mistakes, I sewed my body together at the shoulder seams and at the side seams, which left me with this little vest situation. I then nestled my sleeve into my armhole and used those basting stitches to make it fit exactly before I sewed it in place. Now I do all of that to all of my lining pieces. At this point, I also finished my collar by just sewing it right sides together and then top stitching along the edge. Okay, my collar's done, and before I started putting my pieces together, I just made sure that my shell and my lining were the same length, at least around the neck curve, so I don't run into issues once I try to fit everything together there. So I'm gonna sew my collar onto my shell now. It's a little shorter than it's supposed to be, but that's fine. And then I need to do a little prep on my zipper, which I'm slightly worried is going to be a little bit too long, but I think I can finagle it enough that it'll be fine. Here is my problem. I'm pretty close to the top here. I'm supposed to have about 3/8 of an inch of a gap, but I don't think I'm going to make it around down here. I think I'm going to run into this zipper stop. So I'm thinking I'm going to have to shorten this zipper by about 1/2 inch. Okay, so obviously that's not a huge difference, but I think I will actually be able to get my 3/8 seam allowance and get my needle through there without hitting the zipper pull. So I'm going to sew this down on this side and then do the same on the other side with this half of the zipper. And then I assembled all of my pieces together, which mostly involved making my lining kind of eat my outer fabric and then regurgitate it back up through a hole in its side. And after I flipped it right sides out, I top stitched along the whole thing. My final step was to close up the hole in the side of the lining with an invisible ladder stitch. It's freaking done. I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like I have this thing where when I finish a project, all I can see is the things I didn't do perfect on or things I wish I would have done differently or whatever. And I'm definitely only seeing those things now. Like, I wish I tapered the sleeve more, and I kind of wish my zipper wasn't blue, and I maybe wish I did something different with the collar, but it's fine. And also I'm trying to be nice to myself, because, like, this is one of the more complicated projects I've ever done, and I think technically I did a pretty fine job. And I think it's growing on me. But I also think when you finish a project, it's easy to see just all the things about it that you thought were difficult or you didn't do perfectly. But overall, I think I'm pleased. I think it was a good experiment at the very least. I think I'll do something like this again. It was kind of fun, and I liked having something to do with my hands while listening to an audiobook or hanging out with people. So I think probably more stuff like this is in the future, and I'll be able to get better at it, because that's how things work. Anyway, that's it, I guess. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.